every day when I ride the 44 bus that your dime at work. And so it's, I think, really important to know that there are projects going on all over the city because of the gas tax, and that's a really important work.
I vote aye. The report is accepted. Thank you for your great presentation. Don't go far. Item number 290.
Amend City Code to increase the chief procurement officer's contracting authority and to streamline the procurement and contracting process.
Colleagues, in July of 2017, the City Council passed an ordinance increasing the city's procurement officer's contracting authority from $500,000 to $1 million for public contracts for goods and services and construction, and from $100,000 to $500,000 for professional service contracts. Last December, the City Council extended that increased contracting authority until March 31st. This ordinance would make the Chief Procurement Officer's increased contracting authority permanent, and additionally raise the authority for professional service contracts to $1 million to conform with other categories. And we, of course, have Chief Procurement Officer Lester Stettlers here to present the ordinance and answer any questions. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Good morning, City Council. As the mayor said,
I'm sorry, before legal counsel, I'm sorry to interrupt Lester. Legal counsel had advised me that there was an inadvertently missing underlining on the strike-throughs on Exhibit B, so I've been asked to attach the correct document through substitute, so I'll read what legal counsel has provided. The Exhibit B that was filed with the ordinance is inadvertently missing the underlining and strike-throughs showing the proposed code changes, so we need a motion to substitute Exhibit B, so we have the correct document attached to the ordinance for the record.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty, a second from Commissioner Udaly. Any questions about the substitute? Could we call the roll, please, on the substitute? Commissioner Fritz. Okay.
Well, I just wanted to specify that I was confused by the substitute because there was underlining and strike through for Section A. This new Section B adds some criteria. So it says for amendments not exceeding 25% of the original contract amount, amendments exceeding 25% of the original contract amount, provided the amended contract amount does not exceed 1.25 million. The Director of the Bureau, on behalf of the contract is issued, concurs. The agreed price agreements, if the yearly estimated cost of the city is 1.25 million or less, amendments where an ordinance approved by the City Council grants additional authority to the Chief Procurement Officer beyond those stated rules, and that's the material change.
yeah, correct.
So would you just explain a little bit about what difference does this make?
Sure. So price agreements are a different type of contract than regular contracts. They allow for more of an on-call nature of the work, where there's typically a task order that's issued for a specific scope of work, but the contract in and of itself is more on-call. So previously we had the price agreement authority in Section 533, which is the Goods and Services Authority. It applied to 568, but we're just being more explicit about including it in 568 with this revision.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions on the substitute? Please call the roll on the substitute.
Rich.
Aye.
Hardesty.
So if I understand this amendment correctly, rather than having authority for $1 million, now the procurement officer would have authority to sign a contract for up to $1,250,000. If that is my understanding, I would not support this amendment, and I vote no.
That's
Was that here?
the intent was, there's always been authority in our rules that allows me to increase a contract by 25% of the original value. So I can't award an initial or sign an initial contract up to $1,250,000. It would be up to $1 million, and then if the Bureau needed more capacity in the contract from a funding perspective, then we could amend it to add 25%. So in the cumulative total is 1,250,000, but the initial contract would not be able to exceed $1 million.
So these are on-call contracts that you would be able to negotiate and without the council's oversight, is that correct?
That's correct.
And because of on-call contract, has there ever been a time that you've actually gone into negotiations on $1 million contract for a on-call personnel?
Yeah, the bureaus use a lot of on-call architectural and engineering contracts, and as part of that process, we're not allowed to take price into consideration when we're selecting a contractor. So what happens is the city selects the highest qualified contractor, and then we enter into negotiations with that firm on their hourly rates. The hourly rates are what they bill on each task order. So when a scope of work comes up under a price agreement, the bureau engages the consulting firm. They send them a scope of work, the consulting firm sends back a proposal, and the proposed cost is reflective of the hourly rates that were negotiated at the time the contract was awarded.
So this is a RFP process,
It's a qualifications-based selection RFP process.
and it is a diverse pool of candidates that you're choosing from?
The same goals and objectives apply to these types of procurements that apply to all of our procurements. So depending on the dollar value, we have to solicit them openly and competitively. If they're under a certain dollar value, if it's $100,000 and under, for example, the city is allowed to directly award a contract to a certified firm without going through any competitive process, which is a new pilot, and that's been wildly successful throughout the city.
So how does the city determine whether or not it's effective in reaching its goals of contracting with communities of color and very specifically across the board with women? How do we ever figure out whether or not those goals are achieved?
So the city has an aspirational goal via our subcontractor equity program, and we report on those metrics every year on what the city achieves. I think recently you heard of Fixing Our Streets presentation where the utilization was in the 60%. So, you know, certain contracts are more, are better suited for competing at a smaller level.
So Lester, could I suggest this? Let's finish the vote. It makes me nervous that we have an ongoing dialogue in the middle of the vote. So let's finish the vote, and then let's have this conversation, because it's a good one, and I want to have it, but I just don't think it's appropriate to have it in the middle of an open vote. Continue to call the roll.
You, David?
Great. I'll vote aye to put it on the table.
Aye. The amendment's on the table.
Mayor, given that this is an emergency ordinance, obviously Commissioner Hardesty has questions. I have not reviewed this language and used my financial and legal genius in my office. So I'm wondering if we could set this over till next week so that we have, Commissioner Hardesty has time to get a full briefing and I have just a bit more time to look it over.
I'd be willing to do that, yes.
Would that be, I mean, presumably it's an emergency because you need to get it done quickly. Is there a reason?
I'd rather hold it over for 1 week than remove the emergency clause, if those are my options. Is that what you request? Okay, very good. So we will hold this over in my office. We'll bring it back next week. Thank you, Lester. I appreciate it. Next item, 291.
Adopt revised comprehensive financial management policies, financial planning, operations and maintenance, and budget to address the city's financial planning and annual budget processes.
Colleagues, this resolution adopts 2 revised comprehensive financial management policies and a related procedure that addresses the city's financial planning process and annual budget process. This item was originally heard on March 13th, and this is a substitute resolution. CFO, Chief Financial Officer Jennifer Cooperman, is here to explain the changes in the substitute resolution and answer any questions that you might have about policies. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. As introduced, I'm Jennifer Cooperman. I'm joined by Josh Harwood, City Economist out of the City Budget Office. We're here today to present updates to 2 of the city's comprehensive financial management policies that address the city's financial planning and annual budgeting process. As the Mayor stated, these are substitutes to what I presented on March 13th. There's one change from March 13th, and and that's the deletion of language that address the funding of labor agreement costs. And I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to highlight the following revisions that are being proposed to these policies. FIN 203, which discusses financial planning, has been revised to incorporate specific council direction for bureaus to prioritize asset management as a citywide core business function, including life cycle costing and the setting aside of replacement reserves. And asset management is defined to include the city's investments in capital assets and equipment. And assets are tangible assets as well as intangible assets. Intangible meaning software, right-of-way, etc. FIN 203 also is amended to direct bureaus to develop long-term financial plans, which are in addition to and go beyond the currently required 5-year plans. They're intended to highlight and quantify in these financial plans and in the capital improvement plans funding gaps, as well as proposing strategies to address them. As submitted, FIN 203 will codify the current restriction of capital set-aside resources to projects relating to emergency preparedness, parks and recreation, and transportation. Per Resolution 37101 from 2015, these restrictions are otherwise due to expire on June 30th, 2019. FIN 204 budget has been revised to require bureaus to secure council approval for financial commitments, such as bureau director decisions or litigation settlements of $500,000 or more after the current year budget is approved that a bureau otherwise cannot accommodate. Change guidance for amending the budget during the year to urgent and unforeseen needs rather than needs that are just unanticipated. Will allow one-time resources to be used to address citywide liabilities that are not included in the city's 5-year forecast. Will consolidate the capital set-aside ranking and funding process to once per year during the annual budget process, and will set certain limitations on the competitive special appropriations grant process. And we're available to answer any questions that you might have about these financial policies.
Commissioner Hurst?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much, Director Cooperman. My question has to do with the funding limitations on FIN 2.03. If you look under the funding, we have very narrowly set a standard for how that 50% could be used. That includes emergency preparedness, parks and recreation, and transportation. Does that mean that if any other bureau in the city has a desire to actually utilize that money that's been set aside, that they would have no access to it?
I can try. For the record, Josh Harwood, city economist. Our director, Jessica Kennard, could not be here today. She is experiencing the wonders of flu season, so apologize for her not being here. The short answer is yes. However, it is within council's capacity to waive the policy in an individual circumstance and statewide and so,
Could I just have
yeah.
The current policy is this. It was due to a binding city policy that the council adopted a little over 3 years ago because we got the overall asset report and looked at where are the biggest deficits, and they're in those 3 bureaus. So that's where the 50% is set aside. It's currently set aside to be. That was due to sunset in 4 years, which is why we're having this conversation on that. So thank you for raising it. It doesn't preclude the other 50% of the one-time money going to asset management as well. So that's where we're trying to be really focused on where do we get the biggest bang for the buck in which bureaus, and still the other, in this year's budget, there's 14 million in the one-time, 7 million to asset management in these 3 areas, and 7 million that could go to something else. And I would also say that it's been a little bit, the term emergency management has been used a bit creatively in recent times in that it funded, I think that the firefighters apparatus, right?
Well, thank you very much. That's very helpful because, I think I just turned me off. What is the definition of emergency preparedness? Because as you know, I have the rest of the first responders in my portfolio.
So I'm really surprised that you're questioning this particular thing.
Well, I'm not, you know, if it says emergency preparedness, I'm just wondering if it's across the board. As you said, it's been used creatively that way. I guess my concern is that we don't know what we don't know yet, and there may be something else that comes up that needs capital improvement. And I'm just concerned that we're painting ourselves into a box that we will not be able to get out of.
Could I make a suggestion here? I would recommend we adopt this policy, but I do think there is a need for us to review the question of the categories. One could make a very strong case, and Commissioner Hardesty, I believe you've made